Well, you've been shooting that 6.5 Creedmoor bolt gun, and now you want to get a gas gun. And you're thinking to yourself, hey, I'll get a 6.5 gas gun, and in that way I can use this exact same cartridge between both platforms and save myself a lot of money. Well, as Lee Corso said, not so fast, my friend. Hi everyone, it's a 4Gun Guy. And today we're going to talk about what you need to consider, one specific thing you need to consider if that's where you're going to go with your 6.5 cartridge or any other cartridge. So if you're ready to go, let's get to it. Well, let's start with a story. So I had bought my first PRS bolt gun. In fact, it was this Bergara BMP right here, 6.5 Creedmoor. And then I had a custom 6.5 Creedmoor built by a friend of mine. And then about 2 years ago, I bought the SP10 up here, gas gun. And I love that rifle. I just started using the same ammo, right? I was already reloading, so I just started using that load in the SP10. And I trued my dope. Everything seemed fine. But when I got into the first match with it, I wasn't hitting anything, and it was just all over the place. So after the match, I went to the zero range, and I was talking to a friend of mine, Richard Caples. He runs Caples Precision. He does really good work. But we got to talking, and he said, okay, so, tell me about the rifle. I said, well, it's chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor, just like my bolt gun. And he kind of went, okay. Are you using the same cartridge? I said, well, yeah, it's 6.5 Creedmoor. And he said, okay. He says, what's your neck tension? And I said, same as my bolt gun. He said, and what's that? I said, 1.5 to 2 thousandths neck tension. And he said, okay. He said, that's probably most, if not all, of your problem. And I said, why is that? And then he explained it to me. So let's talk about why that is and what we're talking about here. Now, you may stop right there and say, hey, but Tony, wait a minute. I'm looking at the 6.5 Creedmoor SAMI specs, and they don't say anything about, this is a 6.5 bolt gun cartridge, and here's a 6.5 gas gun cartridge. And you're absolutely right. From a SAMI spec standpoint, these chambers should be very close to each other, right? Whether it's bolt gun or gas gun. If they're SAMI specs, I should be able to go to the store, buy any off-the-shelf ammo, and run it in both these rifles. In fact, I do. If I'm out there playing around or plinking, then I'll just sometimes use off-the-shelf factory ammo that I have laying around. But what they're not telling you is that if you are running that less neck tension on these things, and we're going to see this in a little bit because we're going to go out to the range here in a minute, that what can happen is as that cartridge is being shoved home in that gas gun chamber by that BCG shoving in there, it can change some things, right? So if I have less neck tension, then a couple things can happen. We're going to talk about that after we see the video out at the range, but I just wanted to kind of preface this first with, when you see the violence of this thing out at the range, you'll start to understand what we're talking about here. So I tell you what, let's go out to the range, then we'll have some follow-on discussions and some final thoughts. All right, well, let's have some fun here. I've got 3 rounds. I'm going to load these up. I've got my little camera here. I just have to remember to turn it on this time. And let's see how this looks. I'll start that. Looks like it's recording. Too many balls in the air, guys. And then we're gonna I'm just shooting at a 400-yard target down here. Let's go ahead and see that bolt drop. Watch this thing. I'll try to slow this down. Impact. 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 Well, that's putting the hurt on that steel down there. All right. Mag is out, rifle is safe. So I'll slow this down, and as I'm talking here, just look at really the mechanics of what are happening. These gas guns amaze me. I mean, it just amazes me how they work, how flawlessly this one works. This is my Seekins SP10. It has been a fantastic rifle for me. I haven't had any issues with this in competition, in practice. The only issues I did have were, of course, my problem with the neck tension. But really, since I've adjusted that, it has been fantastic. So you saw the violence of that BCG slamming that case, that cartridge home, right? Yeah, it's a big difference. It is a really big difference. And I think I might have said this out at the range, but I've really slowed my bolt management down. At least I've tried to. My buddy Ben said I did a good job at this last centerfire match, even though my score did not reflect it, but I felt really good with my bolt gun management. But again, that's what we're seeing. So it's taking that 6.5 Creedmoor cartridge and it is slamming it home. Now, if I have little neck tension, like 1.5 to 2 thousandths like I'd run in my bolt gun, what can be happening is that bullet can be kind of, it's minimal, guys. It's infinitesimal when I talk like this. So I'm not saying that it's taking the bullet and slamming it up like this, but it's moving that bullet as it hits that feed ramp violently. That can then start to what? Open up that neck a little more, right? Just again, we're talking 0.5 thousandth, 1/1000th of an inch. But if I only have 1.5 thousandth neck tension and that affects that thing 1/1000th of an inch, now going into the chamber, I may only have a 0.5 thousandth of neck tension. And what can that do? You've got a case going forward in that chamber. You've got a bullet that's loose. And now when that case stops, what happens to the bullet? What can happen? It can get shoved out, right? It could get shoved out enough that it is messing now with how far off the lands you think you're seating that bullet, right? So a lot of things can start to be affected here. I'm not saying it's going to shove the bullet all the way out of the case, but it could be affecting a lot of different things. Or that bullet could be going in there, caddy kind of off concentricity, right? And you had a concentric bullet loaded. Now it hit the feed ramp. It's cantilevered up a little bit. You load it, and now it's pointing up just ever so slightly. Again, guys, I'm talking 3-4 thousandths off center, 5 thousandths off center. And when you pull that trigger, that bullet can start to kind of vibrate, rattle until it gets fully seated in the rifling. And that can affect your SDs, ESs, even your velocity, right? And then your accuracy. So let's have some final thoughts. I'll tell you what I've done to rectify some of this stuff. Interesting story again from this last match. My buddy Jose was talking about, I think it's a 6mm arc that he has. I think that's what he was talking about. It might have been a different cartridge. But he said something very interesting. He said, he goes, I can't get the right cartridge worked up to work in that thing. He said, everything is terrible in it. He said, but I load factory ammo and the thing shoots great. And my gunsmith, our gunsmith, Larry was there. And Larry and I looked at each other and I said, yeah. I said, I had that problem with my 6.5 Creedmoor. I said, think about what's different. Your cartridge is different, right? So I'll bet you're running less neck tension in your hand load. He goes, yeah. He goes, I am. I said, yep. I said, that's probably what it is. If you're going to do that, run the same cartridge in a bolt gun versus a gas gun, here's some things you got to consider, right? For example, I have 2 sets of sizing dies, right? That's just me. So because I'm sizing a little differently for each one. Some of you are going to say, well, why don't you just size down and then use a larger mandrel for your bolt gun than your gas gun. Valid statement, but I don't want to work my brass that much. I only like working my brass from when I've sized down to expanding 1 to 1.5 thousandths of an inch. That's it. And I am now seating my bullets. For my bolt gun, I've gone to 2.5 to 3 thousandths neck tension. So a little more than I was. For this gas gun, Larry said that I should be looking between 6 to 8 thousandths of an inch for neck tension. So I'm around 6 to 6.5 thousandths now on the neck tension for that gas gun. And it has certainly calmed it down. I may do a video on that, just run some really tight and run some really loose and see what that actually does to things and how the numbers look. But that's what I'm doing now, and it seems to be working out just fine. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention. It was something that happened to me, and again, I'm hearing it from other people, that if you're going to run that same cartridge in 2 different platforms, bolt versus gas gun, please consider that neck tension as one of the variables in that equation. And hopefully this will kind of bring things together for you and tighten things up in each platform. So, thanks for watching, everyone. I really do appreciate it. All the likes, comments, subs. And until next time, get that neck tension right and shoot straight.